Welcome to the Pipeline Safety Trust Conference. So excited to welcome you all here. We, this year, have record attendance, more people than ever, well over 200. We also have record members of the public here, which is wonderful, and we're really excited to see that. As you can see, there's been a little drop-off in industry attendance. It's still more than what we had in 2018, but it has dropped off the last couple of years, which I hate to see. But we have been working so hard to build interest among the public. So I was very intentional this year, and we were very intentional as staff and the board in planning discussions in the smaller rooms and incorporating feedback from the last couple years to make sure that this really is an enriching experience for everyone. And I hope that you all find that this year. And I always have an open door for feedback on how we can continue doing that. I want to pass on one thing that I heard last year. I was talking to a member of the public that was here for the first time, and I asked them why they came. And they said, well, I heard this was a place where people in power listen. And that's stuck with me ever since. And that's really powerful. And so I want to continue working to keep this as a place where that's true, that people in power are here and they listen. As Beth mentioned, 2024 is 25 years after the Bellingham tragedy. And as part of that, we did a series of events, mostly for the community of Bellingham. We did things like creek restoration projects. We did creek walks. We led community members around to show where the tragedy happened and the story of that day. There was never any signage in the park where that happened, and we had some signs installed, and you'll see replicas of those signs outside here. So those are in the park now permanently. We did a showing at a local independent theater of the film that I'm about to show you now. We also had a community gathering, which is really powerful, and a bunch of people came to the local high school auditorium and remembered that day. We also had a webinar. We know that the Bellingham tragedy, all of you are here, it has an impact on the national audience. And so we had a webinar where I'm sure a lot of you in this room attended and participated. So as part of that, we have this video. It's 13 minutes. Carl Weimer, our previous executive director, put it together. It's really powerful, and we were carrying it around on a flash drive, and we said, you know, we really should just have this on YouTube. It would be so much easier to at something like this, just bring it up on YouTube instead of carrying around this flash drive. So we put it on YouTube, didn't think much of it, and about a month later, there was millions of views on this video. It's really struck a chord, and we never had any intention of thinking that anybody would see it besides the people we were showing it to, but we're now up to 2.2 million views, and I encourage you to go there and look. There's tens of thousands of comments from people all over the world. It's really struck a chord, and that means a lot to us. So I'm going to take, it's a 13-minute video. It is really emotional. I've seen this a lot, and it still gets me in the gut every time. It's also pretty old and low, maybe a little low quality, so bear with us. But I think it will kind of bring us all back to why we're here. So if we could show that video now.
June 10, 1999 is a warm, clear Thursday in Bellingham, a small city of 70,000 on Washington's northwest coast. By late afternoon, kids are home from school, already eager for the start of summer. At 4:30 p.m., Bellingham's 911 center begins getting calls reporting a strong odor of gasoline. The smell is coming from a wooded recreation area called Watcombe Park.
A call came in for an odor investigation. It's a pretty routine call. So we went to the bridge at Iowa and Woburn, and our captain approached the creek and looked over into the creek, and I just saw his eyes get really wide. It was just basically a river of gasoline.
Police and firefighters rush to evacuate the area and locate the source of the leak. Then, with no warning, the gas vapor rising from the creek ignites.
911, there's a big smoke. The sky is smoke. Okay, smoke. Here, hold on. Below, and yes, I'd like to report an explosion. Okay. This is Alabama Hill. 911. There's been an explosion. Where's it at? Down by, Seahome Village.
Hello, have you heard about the fire on Alabama Hill?
Yes, we have.
My power just went off and there was a big boom outside.
Right, we are on scene.
I was at the store and a customer came running in and said downtown Bellingham had just exploded.
A house along Whatcom Creek catches fire.
I heard the guy that was working on our house say, "Oh my God, look at the fire. Somebody's house is on fire." And I ran out to the front yard and I could feel the heat of the flames on my face.
My first reaction is, where's Wade?
10-year-old Wade King and his friend Stephen Chorvis were last seen headed down towards the creek.
One of the teenagers down at Stephen's house said he was out on the back trail.
The two severely burned boys had climbed up on their own from the creek. The teenagers carry them to the front yard just as Wade's father arrives.
Well, his hair was all burned off. His face was stretched. I remember looking at their hands and the skin was virtually dripping off their fingertips.
Wade's mother runs out of their house and down the street towards the boys.
Frank was in the yard and he said, go home. Wade's been burned.
I remember telling Mary, "Don't look at him."
He was all distorted looking. And he said, Mom, don't look.
You know, they seemed to be lucid. I never thought for a second that they were gonna die.
Caught in traffic, Stephen's mother has a premonition that something is terribly wrong.
I had an awful, awful feeling about it. I had every intention of getting home as quickly as possible. And we were trying to call home, and we couldn't get through. And finally, our daughter got through and said, Stephen's burned. They're going to take him to the hospital.
Both boys are burned over 90% of their bodies. From the local hospital, they are airlifted to the Harborview Trauma Center in Seattle.
We got to the hospital in Harborview, and the doctor said they cannot survive. They have no skin.
Back in Bellingham, the fire continues to burn, and another mother is waiting for her son to return home. 18-year-old Liam Wood had graduated from high school the week before. He'd spent the afternoon doing what he loved best, fishing in the park.
I had expected Liam to be home because he was going to be cooking dinner for us that night, and I started calling his friends because I started to worry, and they were calling, not having any clue of what was going on, just trying to find him. And then I got in the car and I drove down and tried to find his car. At one point I had to stop to get gasoline, and when I was in paying for it, the cashier behind the counter was listening to the radio, and I said, "Is there any news?" And he said, "Well, they found a body." And then I really started to panic, and I went home and I turned on the radio and they didn't mention it again, and I thought it must have been a mistake.
A search and rescue team recovers a body from the creek. But it is not until after midnight that the body is positively identified.
Around 2:30 in the morning, we heard steps on the porch, and well, at first I thought it was him, and it was the police. So they told us then.
At Harborview Hospital, the two boys cling to life as their families stand vigil by their bedside.
You couldn't touch him. You couldn't comfort him. There was nothing we could do but stand there and wait for him to die.
My son loved baseball, and I didn't want him to suffer. So I told him there's a baseball game going on in heaven, and they needed a left-handed hitting catcher.
Wade dies at just after 2 a.m. Stephen dies 5 hours later. In the days following the explosion, the town of Bellingham mourns its loss.
Liam felt at home in places like this. Places like this were his sanctuary.
It was just this incredible shock and this immediate sense of irony that someone who loved the environment, loved the outdoors so much, could be killed by something like a gasoline pipeline explosion in that place.
I remember waking up the next morning and thinking, who would have ever thought that you'd be planning your son's funeral this weekend?
And these boys, all three of them, were so much a part of this town. Everyone was shocked, absolutely shocked. We had no idea that there was a pipeline going through our community.
Olympic Pipeline sends representatives to Bellingham to reassure the town that the company itself is doing everything it can.
Right after the pipeline explosion, on one of the first meetings Olympic had with the community, they came in and their PR people were sitting at tables and they were giving out these little Olympic pipeline first aid kits. And here they've just blown up the town and killed people, and the one thing they're giving away is, 2 aspirin and a couple of Band-Aids.
Less than a month after the accident, the company announces plans to repair and reopen the pipeline as soon as possible. The town's reaction is immediate.
That was one of the most outrageous and ridiculous requests that I've ever heard in 17 years in public life.
Every living thing in the creek had been killed. And Olympic Pipeline was already talking about putting the pipe back in the ground and getting it going again before anybody had any clue why the thing had exploded.
Weimer and other concerned citizens begin a grassroots effort to stop the pipeline from reopening.
The citizens of Bellingham really stood up to say, no, you're not going to start that pipeline. There was a petition drive that had 5,000 or 6,000 signatures on it.
But what the town doesn't realize is that petitions and protests don't matter. Throughout the United States, local and state governments have next to no legal authority over the pipelines. To stop them, the people of Bellingham begin learning everything they can about pipelines. What they discover stuns them.
We didn't know anything about pipelines at all, and we were real surprised to find out accidents like this were not really anomalies. They happen quite frequently.
There are 2 million miles of liquid and natural gas pipelines in the United States. In the last decade, spills and ruptures occurred at a rate of nearly 1 a day. Dozens of tragedies like Bellingham's had happened throughout the country, but few of them got national attention.
You would assume that a pipeline running through a community that has the ability to cause such a huge tragedy would be fairly heavily regulated. And that may be true with some industries, but when we looked at pipelines, that wasn't true at all.
There were no national regulations requiring pipelines to be internally inspected. No regulations requiring leak detection systems. And there were no set standards for training pipeline employees. To make matters worse, local and state governments had no authority to do anything about the problem. That power rested exclusively in the hands of a tiny federal agency called the OPS, or Office of Pipeline Safety. The experiences of the last year have only strengthened their resolve to prevent this tragedy from happening somewhere else.
I think it's time for us to assert our right and our responsibility as citizens to say, we need to think about the health and the safety of our children and of our teachers and of our parents and grandparents and our environment before we think about pipeline profits.
Really, the only way to make this pipeline safe again and at the same time make other pipelines and other communities safe was to get regulations changed at the national level.
They take their message to any government agency that will listen. Their efforts eventually lead them to Washington, D.C. to speak before Congress.
The pipeline industry will never have as its bottom line the health and safety of communities. It is up to communities themselves and therefore their public representatives and government agencies to ensure that pipelines are safe. We would have to pay our way to Washington, D.C. And we would try to give our input, and we would have the ability to speak in front of the Senate, which was incredible for us. But what we'd realized was that there were one or two of us citizens in a room who knew nothing about pipelines, and we were surrounded by pipeline corporate CEOs and lobbyists who knew everything about it, who were there every day, who were being paid an enormous amount of money to influence politicians and being enormously successful at it.
We were naive at that point that this was such a no-brainer when you looked at the lack of legislation and the lack of regulations that the Congress would just go along with us. So I don't think we knew what we were getting ourselves into.
Despite the overwhelming odds, people in power are starting to listen. Even the pipeline industry itself begins to realize that things need to change.
Bellingham is just one of those events that comes along from time to time, regretfully, where a safety situation has been ignored for so long that finally, all of the warts of the system are brought together in one horrible, horrible moment.
In December 2002, a new Federal Pipeline Safety Act is signed into law. It mandates that pipelines be inspected every 7 years, sets rigorous training standards for pipeline employees, raises fines, and offers protection for industry whistleblowers.
I think that the American public owes a great deal to the citizens of Bellingham. They were no longer a voice crying in the wilderness. It was, they went and basically have changed the wilderness.
I'm Bruce Brabec, and my stepson, Liam Wood, was one of the 3 boys that died in the Bellingham disaster. He was the 18-year-old that was fishing. It's always hard to watch that film, and I've just seen it too many times, but I do, as Bill said, it's very powerful, and I think it is important to show people. I want to add a little more to the story of that day and to Liam's life. As they did say in the film that Liam had just graduated from high school. It was 5 days before we had the big celebration, the big graduation. And as you can imagine, he was on top of the world. High school was behind. And he was enrolled at Western Washington University, which is a university in the town of Bellingham, and he was going to be moving into the dormitory in the fall. He'd already started a dream job. He was working at a fishing and outfitting shop in the town, and this was a dream job because he got to spend his day selling fishing equipment and talking about fishing with people. And that fit him perfectly, because he was a very experienced and very knowledgeable and very passionate fly fisher. When I came in to the family as a stepdad when he was 11, he was already pretty far along and advanced as a fly fisher. He started fishing when he was 6. He started fly fishing when he was 8. He'd already built, when I first came into the family, he'd already built a fly fishing rod, and he built another one a little bit after that. He tied his own flies. He had many friends that he fished with, and many who he taught to fly fish, so that he had even more friends to fish with. And he liked even to fish alone. It was a way for him to spend time in the natural world. Fly fishing, I would say, was his happy place. So it makes sense when that day he found out he didn't have to work, and so went off to do what he would want to do when he had free time. He went to fish at one of his favorite places at Whatcom Creek. So that day, here he is. He's very happy to be done with high school. He's heading into the summer with just all kinds of excitement about it and what the fall holds in terms of starting college. Our family was very happy. I mean, the 3 of us were just very, very happy that Liam had made it through high school and that he was starting in the fall, and just the thought of this great young man and what he was what he had to unfold in front of him. It was very exciting to us as a family. So it started out that day as a very fantastic day that was filled with just anticipation for the summer, for the fall, for Liam's life. And as you know, all of that was gone by the end of the day. Marlene, it's the 25th year. This happened 25 years ago, and I was going to say this year, the 25th year, is also, that seems like a long time ago. And this year has seemed really long too, as we were back in Bellingham for many of the, or all of the memory events, I guess you could call them. And here I am again talking about the 25th. And so Marlene and I, we've been carrying grief around for a long time. And we've been grieving Liam's loss, but we've also been grieving the loss of Stephen and Wade. Even though Marlene and I never met them, but we share very deep sorrow with Stephen's parents, Skip and Catherine, and with Wade's parents, Frank and Mary. We were able to spend some good time with them, and, well, good's not the right word, with some rich time with them when we saw them again this last June at the memory events. And what Marlene and I have learned in these 25 years of carrying this grief around is we've learned that you don't move on from grief. As much as there were people who tried to tell us that we would, we weren't moving on from grief. But you can, what we did learn is you can move forward with it. And that's what we've been doing. We've been moving forward with our grief. We've moved forward one day at a time. Sometimes I'm leaning on Marlene, and sometimes she's leaning on me. And sometimes, I'll admit, we both have to stop and stand in place because we can't move. But we know we're still going to keep moving in that direction. And there are some times when we actually have real joy that's moving us forward, a joy, a memory of our life, of our very, I really would mean this sincerely, of our very happy family. And one of the examples I'll say is Liam in his last year had grown quite a bit, and he was taller than me, and he was broader shouldered than me. I think you might have seen the picture with Marlene and I and Liam standing at his graduation. He was taller than me. And it was always interesting, that last year to always, look at him, it was always a little bit startling, have this little boy of yours growing up and getting so big. And what Marlene reminded me of some things that something I hadn't remembered. She goes, remember how you'd come home from work, and this last year, it's this kid bigger than me, and I'd walk into the house, and he'd jump up from the couch, and he'd go, Brucey! It's one of those, as you can see, memories that really make me smile, and that helps carry us forward with our grief. The Pipeline Safety Trust also helps us move forward with our grief. It came out of what happened in Bellingham. The story didn't talk about that in this film, but the Pipeline Safety Trust really developed shortly after this film. And it came from we got it started, we were able to start it with fines from the federal lawsuit against Olympic. And so it came out of what happened in Bellingham and out of the deaths of these three boys. And because of that, it acknowledges our grief, the grief that Marlene and I are walking forward with. But it also joins us because we've been wanting to make a difference. We want to make sure that other communities don't experience what Bellingham experienced, and we want to make sure that other families don't experience that our three families experienced. And the Pipeline Safety Trust shares and joins with us in carrying forward that intention. So each year I look forward to coming to this conference with mixed feelings, I guess I could say, but there is a looking forward. And I look forward to being amidst this really large and diverse group because all of you have the same intentions and share those with us, and that you want to make a difference. And that we really have a group, a very diverse group of safety advocates, pipeline safety advocates in this room. And I like coming and being a part of that. Leading up to this conference, I was thinking, if I ended up talking, I really wasn't sure if I was going to. I thought about this, the quote we all know of, "It takes a village to raise a child." And it seemed relevant to our gathering because I know that it takes a community to ensure pipelines are safe. I think Marlene made that comment in the film, you saw it too. And the pipeline safety community is not a village, but it is made up of a very diverse group. It's people from the industry, it's regulators, it's government officials and politicians, it's the public, it has community organizers, and it has safety advocates. It has affected members of the public like me, and it has other concerned citizens. And the PST understood right in it from its beginnings, it understood that it's going to take a community to make a difference. And that's why it works to bring all your voices together. That community is here in this room. We have that diverse, that broad spectrum of representation that makes up a community. My wish, I guess, is that this, I mean, Bill talks about this being already, that we've grown and we're very proud of that. My wish is for it to grow even more. And I guess I would say even more, I'm glad that the public is growing and we're going to keep doing that, but I really want the industry to grow. There are too many of the industry that are not in the room that need to be in the room. We have a good energy that's created by this, that's sort of a force that's helping things to move forward. But we need more. We need more of the industry here. And so I hope we'll see that number go back up again, and even more than what it has been in the past. And the Pipeline Safety Trust, besides trying to just bring together all our voices, it works to bring, it also encourages participation and discussion, and even debate as needed. This conference is a part of that effort to bring the voices together and have those discussions and debate. And it offers opportunities for all of you to engage with one another. So I encourage you to join in the discussions. I encourage you to join in the discussions and to bring your voice to the rooms that you're going to be dispersing out to. I encourage you to ask your questions. I encourage you to debate as needed, and I encourage you to listen to each other. And I know from my personal experience that's not always easy. As much as I believe in this effort of the Pipeline Safety Trust, participation, discussion, community, I wasn't always comfortable with it myself. When I helped found the Pipeline Safety Trust, I was a founding board member, Marlene and I both, I strongly supported these values of inclusion and the importance of dialogue, and back then particularly of dialogue with the industry. But now I really see it as much broader dialogue. But I mostly spent my time working on protecting the finances so I could make sure the organization would continue into the future, and I helped to shape the organization. But I really stayed out of what I'd say were the conversations about specific safety measures. Frankly, I did not want to become an expert on pipeline safety. I just wanted Liam back. I knew I wanted to be in the room, but I couldn't always talk when I was in the room. I just knew if people knew that I was there and knew who I was going to have an impact, and so I've continued to want to be in the room. And it wasn't actually until I started attending probably my first conference that I began participating in a more meaningful and a conversational way with the whole community, not just the Pipeline Safety Trust community. That was my first community. So slowly over the years, I'm finding my voice. And I guess I'd say I'm still finding it because I get overwhelmed at times by my emotions, but I keep trying. Sometimes my emotions don't want me to even come up here. And sometimes when I'm up here, it's hard to even say what I'm saying. But I feel the importance of it, and I'll keep trying. So I hope that during this conference, you all find your ways, your opportunities to participate, to ask your questions, to listen, to debate as needed, and to challenge one another in ways that benefit us all and advance our intentions for pipeline safety. It really does take this community to ensure pipelines are safe. And Marlene and I thank you all for your participation in this community, for coming to this conference and being a part of this. It means a lot to us that you are here.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I know that's hard for you, but it means so much to all of us here to hear your words and your perspective, and yeah, thank you. A few things before we move on to our speakers. Obviously, the Bellingham tragedy is our moral bedrock, and Bruce and Marlene's experience through that is our moral bedrock, and all of our work comes from that. And it means a lot that it has become so meaningful to the industry and to the regulators. But I just want to remind everybody that there were a lot of pipeline tragedies before Bellingham, and there have been a lot since. And it is not just Bellingham. Just last year in West Reading, there was an awful pipeline tragedy. That and others killed 17 people last year. It was the deadliest year for pipelines in a decade. So we have a lot of work to do, and that's why we're here. To the industry folks that are here, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to lean into the difficult conversations that happen here. It wouldn't be the conference it is without you here. And by being here, I know that it means that you take pipeline safety seriously, and I hope you continue to be leaders. To the public members that are here, I also want to thank you. I know many of you didn't necessarily want to become interested in pipeline safety. Like Bruce and Marlene, it was forced upon you. And just know that the Pipeline Safety Trust is here to help you advocate for your safety, and in any way we can be of service to keep you and your community safe. To the government folks that are here, the regulators, the tribal government, local government, want to thank you for dedicating yourselves to public service, and many of you specifically to pipeline safety. So let's all do our part in this conference to honor what I heard last year about that this is a place where people in power listen. You know, some of the goals of our conference, we aim to support respectful and productive discussions. We see it as an opportunity for dialogue and building understanding among groups that may rarely share the same space in collaboration. And we aim to take advantage of this rare gathering of diverse stakeholders by facilitating difficult conversations and encouraging and supporting participants to hear each other and not talk past each other. In all of our activities as PST, including this conference, our core values are always the same, and that's to be credible, independent, and in the public interest. And a reminder that the focus of this conference is pipeline safety, and many other interests are valid and important, but we will try to keep coming back to that shared value of pipeline safety here.